Sit there laughing at me at the petrol station? I'll inconvenience you even more. This was a few years ago. I pulled into my local petrol station. All the pumps were in use, so I pulled up behind one of the pumps waiting for the van using it to finish and move off. After quite a few minutes, the driver casually strolled out of the shop in no hurry, despite the queue at the busy forecourt, and walked to his van. He could see that I and several other vehicles were queuing to use the pumps. The van driver in the pump next to him was obviously a friend. That driver finished up and the two of them stood and had a chat. They were aware of us waiting and were clearly loving the fact that they were holding us all up, even turning to laugh arrogantly at the guy waiting next to me who called to them to move away from the pumps. This went on for 5 minutes more until they got bored of their silly game and drove off. The moron was a plasterer and had his name and phone number written all over his van, plying his trade. Oh boy. I'm petty, and made a note of his details. A few weeks later, I called him up and said I'd bought a house in need of renovation and needed a quote to board out and skim the entire house. Oh, he was only too happy to quote for a big project, assuring me he was great at his trade and I could not find a better quote. We discussed his availability and he was keen to come and look at the job. I gave him the address of a run-down house a few streets away from me that had recently sold at auction. He knew the property, he had driven past it a few times and noticed it was up for auction. We arranged for him to call the following day. Of course, I wasn't there. He rang a few times and left a voicemail checking where I was. Eventually, I called him back, very apologetic, said my husband had fallen off a ladder and I had to take him to A&E. He said okay, I'll rearrange the visit. We arranged another time a few days later. The next appointment came and I had 2 more messages from him, clearly annoyed I wasn't there again. I called him back again and apologized. I said I could totally understand his anger and wasted time. It reminded me of the time I was sat at a petrol station a few weeks ago and some idiot and his mate stood having a good old chat whilst laughing at the drivers waiting to use the pumps. I heard the penny drop. That was when the raging and swearing started, which just set me off roaring with laughter. I made my point, it was fabulous. I spent the next few weeks blocking various numbers sending abusive texts, but he got bored of that eventually. I hope he learned that actions have consequences.